The preaching passage is a little different. It's Ecclesiastes 5:18 through 20. This is what I have observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them. For this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. I entitled this "Whistle While You Work." You may remember that tune. You remember that tune? Runs through my head once in a while. I suppose it could mean that we're supposed to be happy, and maybe we are. Let's see, I've got... Oh, and my other piece of paper fell out in the car. Nope, here it is. Whew. Thought I messed up for sure. All right, so we'll begin this. Do you remember last year's sermon? Some of you commented on it. Some of you said you wanted to share it. And it should be spinning around in cyberspace somewhere. If you go to our YouTube channel, and Pastor Chris's sermons is the section, and look at last year. And you may remember that the discussion of work then, we talked about work on Labor Day weekend. And it was this idea that some of us grow up with the concept that work is something we have to do in order to survive. And some of us grow up with the concept that it's a privilege to work. And that difference between us makes all the difference in the world as how we approach work. So I've got a few little work jokes here. Working in a mirror factory is something I can see myself doing. Yeah. I hired a handyman and gave him a list of jobs to do. Of the jobs on the list, he completed just numbers 1, 3, 5, and 7. Turns out he only does odd jobs. I took an exam last week to see if I could become an insect inspector. I think I'll get the job because I boxed all the right ticks. Yeah, well, okay. Working as a lumberjack for the past 3 years, I know that I have cut down 10,432 trees. How, you ask? Every time I cut one down, I keep a log. People think that being a waiter isn't a respectable job, but hey, it puts food on the table. If you are in need of a job, you could try search and rescue. They are always looking for people. Why did the man have to quit his job fixing baths, sinks, and showers? The work was just too draining. Oh, be kind. People are often shocked when they find out what a bad electrician I am. Employer says, for this role, the candidate needs to be responsible. I say, I'm your man. In my last job, whenever anything bad happened, the boss always told me I was responsible. Here's the boss, why do I always have to come looking for you? And I say, because a good worker is hard to find. I once worked for an elevator company. The job had its ups and downs. As I get older, I think of all the people I've lost along the way. Maybe a career as a tour guide wasn't for me. I didn't think my chiropractor was very good. However, now I stand corrected. And the last one, I've been trying to break up with an optician recently. It's really hard. Every time I tell her I can't see her anymore, she moves an inch closer and says, "How about now?" When I was a young man, very young, I'm actually trying to think how old, maybe 5, 6 years old, something like that. My dad changed jobs. He had been working in a factory. He earned $40 a week, and he had an opportunity to become an electrician. And so he started his apprenticeship as an electrician. And in order for him to do that, he had to take a cut in pay. So now he was only earning $35 a week, but he was just sure that this was going to be a better career path for him than working in the ball band factory in our town in Mishawaka, Indiana. And so I remember very well that on Fridays, Dad got paid. And when he got paid, he would stop at the bank on the way home from work and he would cash his check. He would put that big bundle of money, all $35, into his wallet, and he would walk around most of the weekend with it in there. I think he just liked to feel that lump, you know? This is what I earned. And then at the end of the weekend, he gave it to Mom. Yeah. But he carried it for a while, you know. He was reminded of the rewards of his work. You know, often we are asked, what are we going to be when we grow up, aren't we? We think about that a lot. I still think about it. What am I going to be when I grow up? When I retired, I spent time looking at the help wanted ads. In fact, I spent a lot of time looking at the help wanted ads because I had worked since I was 11 years old and gotten my first paper route. I just couldn't imagine not working. And then I thought again, what do I want to be when I grow up? Our message today could be how we find identity in our work, right? You know, what do you do? It's one of the first questions that you're asked when you meet somebody new. And maybe it's the first question that you ask. What do you do? We somehow find our identity in our work. It's not that message. The message could be about workaholism and how we need to set priorities in our life, and the message isn't about that either. This is about the gift of work that God has given us. You see, work in itself is part of God's plan. Now, that isn't entirely different than last year's message, but we're going to deviate a little bit from where we went last year. It's part of God's plan for our lives. We don't work just for a paycheck, or at least we shouldn't work just for a paycheck. We should be working for Christ. You see, work gives us an opportunity to live out what it means when Jesus says, you are salt and you are light. Do you know that? When we're working for Christ, we are somehow spreading His love. We are spreading His message. We are touching lives in a way that make a difference. I knew a doctor once. Pastors spend a lot of time in hospitals. Unfortunately, I was in one yesterday. Malcolm Hare is not doing well right now. This doctor was an interesting person. He was kind of the head of the hospital, but not really. But he did supervise the doctors and most of the medical staff there in one way or another. His actual job was an emergency room doctor. Now, here was a man who, in every situation, found something positive to say. He spent time complimenting the people on the work they did. If somebody did something in the ER which made a difference in someone's life, maybe saved that life, he would tell that person how they contributed to saving that life. If blood was drawn and it went down to the lab, he would call down to the lab and ask who ran that sample for me and thank them personally for running that sample and tell them once again how they contributed to the health of that person. He knew the names of every employee in that hospital. Now, it wasn't a huge hospital like some that we know, but he knew the names of every one. He greeted them in the hallway. He complimented them on their work. He encouraged them in all situations. He even knew the people that cleaned the rooms and that cleaned the hospital. And he complimented them as well. One time the doctor had a new doctor on his staff, and he was showing him the ropes, okay? An intern. And this doctor, he had spent a lot of time with, and they had talked about all kinds of medical things. But at some point, our doctor said to the new doctor, do you know the name of the man that cleans our ER suite? Now, the new doctor thought that was a pretty weird question. How could that possibly be important to his job? The doctor said, his name is Carlos. He has a wife. Her name is Maria. He has 4 children. They live about 3 blocks from the hospital here in a rented home. He said, before the end of the day, I want you to tell me something about Carlos that I don't already know. A lot more to a job than just the nuts and bolts of accomplishing it, isn't there? At least there should be a lot more to the job than just the nuts and bolts of accomplishing it. We get so focused on our goals that people are just shoved aside in order to accomplish them. And yet, when we embrace the other people that we work with and for and that work for us, the job is actually much easier, much more fun, and it's accomplished in a way that it would never be accomplished if you were going it alone. And not only that, but you spread a love of God. Without ever mentioning his name, you touch other people's lives. This is Colossians 3:23 and 24. You do not work for other people. Whatever you do in your job, do it with all of your heart, because God gave you this work to do. It is God that you work for in an audience of one. Nobody else. Just God. And if you please him, if you honor him, then you will honor everyone else in your workplace. You will honor everyone that you make contact with through your job. I've had a lot of different jobs in my life over the years. And the one I was built for, I'm doing now, by the way. It just took me a long time to get here. I was actually in my early 40s when I started pastoring. I owned a company for a while, and when I owned that company, I was young and I was brash, and there was nothing more important than accomplishing the things that I thought we needed to accomplish. Now, sometimes I did good things when I was accomplishing those things, and sometimes not good at all. And as I reflect back on my life and on the way I handled people, from a very, very, very young age, I was put in charge of other people. And you know what? I did a terrible job of it. I know I did a terrible job of it. I was a little older when I had my company, and I had a secretary there. This secretary grew up with all these negative voices in her head. You can't believe the things that she must have heard growing up. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not good enough. There's no possible way that you can make anything of your life. She believed all that because she had heard it over and over and over again. She had self-esteem that was about knee-high to an ant, None whatsoever. Now, one of the good things that I did in my job as a boss in my life was I managed to build her up. I managed to encourage her. I complimented her when she got it right, I helped her understand what it took to get it right each time. And she just flourished. She handled finances. She was amazing with customers. She could charm anybody. She ran the show and did an amazing job when others had told her whole life she never would amount to anything. Some of you have had those voices in your life. I know you have. And then there were the mistakes. We were getting ready for a show. We had a booth rented at a show in Chicago. And in order to display our products, we needed to have a variety of basically pedestals and furniture and that sort of thing that we would set our products on to display them to those that would come to our booth. And, something to hold all of our brochures. And most of you have been to trade shows of one kind or another in your life. You know what that looks like. I was actually out of town on a business trip, and I left instructions to have a pedestal made, dimensions, materials, how I wanted it put together, exactly what I needed. And I got back from my trip on a Saturday, so, nobody was working at the shop. And I walked in, and there was my pedestal that I had given very specific instructions on how I wanted it made. And guess what? It wasn't what I needed. I was leaving for the trade show on Sunday afternoon to get set up. The person that had made the pedestal for me had decided it looked kind of plain. And so he had taken this aluminum edging and had put it all around the edge to make it nice and fancy. Unfortunately, the aluminum edging meant that it wouldn't nestle up to the other groups of things that I had for it. It just wouldn't work anymore. I was angry that they hadn't done what I told them to do, and I ripped that metal edge off, and I went over to the guy's toolbox that had the person who had made it for me, and I put that crumpled up piece of aluminum with nails sticking out of it on top of his toolbox, and I left for the trade show with my pedestal. Now, here's the thing. The guy was trying to do something nice. He thought what I had designed was a little plain. It needed some fancying up. And so he tried to go beyond what I had asked for and do something extra special for me. When I put that crumpled up piece of aluminum that he had worked so hard to put on the edges of my pedestal on his toolbox, I not only embarrassed him, in fact, I did embarrass him just because everybody in the shop saw it sitting there. I made him feel bad. You know, there are lots of options that I could have done. Instead of turning him into a sullen employee, somebody whose feelings were hurt, somebody that didn't want to do anything for me again, I could have taken the piece of aluminum and hidden it in the trash somewhere where he would have never seen it and never known that what he did wasn't going to work. I could have thanked him. I could have encouraged him. Did I do any of those things? No. Because, after all, it inconvenienced me, right? And nobody inconveniences Chris. No. Not standing for it. Not standing for it. We've all had that feeling once or twice in our lives, I'm sure. And we've all made those kinds of mistakes, probably, although I'm guessing a few of you have softer hearts than I had. When we do our job, we have an opportunity to be a reflection of Christ or something much, much darker, don't we? And it's the little things that we do every day, the compliments that we might give somebody, the encouragement that we might give somebody, or the impatience that we show, the way we look at a person can just wither somebody sometimes. It's not helpful. It doesn't honor God, and it doesn't honor the kingdom. Even though he was God, this is Philippians 2, 6 through 8, by the way. And it's kind of interesting because I'm going to read it first the way that we're used to hearing it, and then I'm going to read it based on new scholarship, the understanding of how it was really written. You have to understand translation grows over the years. As people translate Scripture, they learn things that they didn't know before. God did not write the King James Bible. I'd just like you to know that. And we do learn things as we study the Scriptures. Here's how we're used to hearing Philippians 2, 6 through 8. Even though he was God, Jesus humbled himself and took the form of a servant. Heard that one? Sure you have. New scholarship has taught us that this is a more accurate translation. Who, because he was in nature God, humbled himself and became a servant. It's different, isn't it? It's a little different. You see, it's God's nature to serve. That's what he does. He serves. And if we're built in his image, what do you think we're made to do? We're made to serve. To serve. Sometimes we forget to serve sometimes. And I've got to admit, I'm one of these people that never really liked a buffet. And I just want to sit at my table and be, yeah. I don't want to crawl up there and handle the same handle that 5,000 other people have handled. And get out my rubber gloves and... No, I want to be waited on. We all want to be waited on. It's just something inherent in us where we want to be served. And we do that far more often sometimes than we serve. But let me tell you about great leadership. Great leadership is to serve, isn't it? It isn't to be served. Great leadership is to serve. So how important are you in your own mind? Yeah, sometimes we build ourselves up. I worked in a hospital for a while as an x-ray technician, and we had radiologists on the staff, and they were legends in their own minds, I can tell you. Oh my goodness. They all had this book. Each of them had a book with the way they wanted each procedure set up and what have you. These were the most cantankerous, difficult people that I have ever tried to work with in my life. Contrast that to the doctor that I told you about. The one that's loving all of his the folks that he works with, the folks that he works for, and the folks that work for him. He's encouraging them, he's loving them, he's building them up, he's helping them to be the best that they can possibly be. And he does that by serving them. So my question for you today is, are you willing to serve, or do you want to be served? God bless.